The warship Aurora's Fang glided silently through the endless black of space. Its hull bore scars from countless battles, and the hum of its engines was the only sound in the quiet of the ship's interior. On board, the human soldier Lieutenant Kyle walked through the narrow corridors, his boots echoing softly against the metal floor. He had faced many missions before, from battlefields scorched by fire to deep space ambushes that had tested the limits of both skill and courage, but nothing had prepared him for this one. Kale had been chosen for a special assignment, to guard and accompany a member of the Vulpine royal family. Princess Lyra, heir to a proud and cunning species known for their speed, agility, and intelligence, had been sent aboard the warship as part of a delicate peace treaty. The princess was beautiful, fierce, and unyielding. Her amber eyes seemed to pierce through everyone, and her presence commanded attention. Kale had heard stories of her cunning and skill, but now he was going to meet her face to face. The mission should have been simple: ensure her safety and complete the ship's patrol. But a sudden attack by enemy forces had left the ship's living quarters damaged. Many cabins were destroyed, including the one assigned to Kale and the one assigned to the princess. The captain, stern and unwavering, had issued an unusual order. Kyle and Lyra would have to share a cabin and a single bed until repairs were complete. Kyle had clenched his jaw when the order was given. He had spent years in the military, trained to endure harsh conditions, but sharing a small space with a Vulpine princess was entirely new. He was used to soldiers sleeping shoulder to shoulder with comrades, but this was different. Lyra was royalty, and she had a reputation for being proud and unapproachable. The thought of being in such close quarters with her made him uneasy. Lyra, for her part, had not been pleased either. Her life had always been one of careful control and strict routine. The idea of being forced into close quarters with a human, an alien from another species, was humiliating. She had been taught that humans were brave but reckless, strong but unpredictable. Now she would have to share a bed with one. Her fur bristled at the thought, and her tail flicked with irritation. The moment they stepped into the small cabin, the tension was palpable. The room was tight, barely enough space for a single bed, and the metallic walls reflected the dim light from the ceiling. Kale set down his gear, his movements precise and careful. Lyra walked in, her movements graceful but deliberate, and her eyes scanned the room with a mixture of annoyance and calculation. Neither spoke. Words would only make the situation more awkward. Kale positioned himself on one side of the bed, keeping as much distance as possible. He could feel the heat from Lyra's body as she adjusted herself on the other side. She curled into a tight ball, tail wrapping around her, clearly trying to maintain control over the situation. The silence between them was heavy, almost suffocating, and Kale's mind raced with thoughts of how he would survive the night. He remembered his training, discipline, patience, and calmness in all situations. He focused on controlling his breathing, shutting out distractions, but the princess was unlike anything he had encountered before. Her presence was sharp, intelligent, and alive, like a predator quietly watching him. And yet, there was something else. A vulnerability, perhaps, hidden behind her proud demeanor. Lyra, lying on the other side of the bed, felt the human's steady breathing. At first it annoyed her, but slowly she began to notice his calmness, the quiet strength that radiated from him. He was not just a soldier. He was a protector, someone who carried his responsibilities with unwavering focus. And though she would never admit it, she found herself curious about him. That night, neither slept well. The bed was too small, the air thick with tension, and yet as they lay side by side in silence, something began to shift. Two very different beings from worlds apart were forced into proximity. Pride, fear, and uncertainty hung between them. But for the first time, Kyle noticed the quiet strength in her gaze, and Lyra noticed the steady determination in his. This was just the beginning. The first night aboard the warship passed slowly. The narrow cabin felt smaller than ever, the metal walls reflecting the dim red emergency lights from the corridor. Lieutenant Kale lay on one side of the bed, back straight, arms crossed over his chest. He could feel the faint warmth of Princess Lyra's fur brushing against his arm. Every shift she made sent tiny shivers through him, not from fear but from the strange closeness he was not used to. Lyra curled herself into a tight ball, tail coiled around her like a shield. Her ears twitched, alert to every sound, the hum of the engines, the the distant clanging of machinery and the soft, steady breathing of the human beside her. Pride and discomfort warred in her mind. She had faced countless enemies in her life, survived political traps and dangerous negotiations, yet lying on this bed with a human, forced into intimacy by circumstance, felt like the hardest battle of all. Neither of them spoke. Words might have ruined the fragile peace between them. Cale focused on steadying his breath, practicing the discipline drilled into him over years of military service. He replayed tactical scenarios in his mind, thinking of ways to repair the ship faster, ways to anticipate enemy attacks, anything to keep from thinking about how close the princess lay beside him. Meanwhile, Lyra's mind raced with its own calculations. Humans were strange creatures, she reminded herself. Too honest, too direct, and yet undeniably strong. Cale's presence was calm, unyielding, and he exuded a quiet confidence she had not seen in many of her own kind. Despite herself, she found a strange reassurance in it. Perhaps, she thought, this human soldier was not as reckless as her advisors claimed. Hours passed slowly, each tick of the clock magnifying their awkwardness. Every movement, every slight turn of the body was noticed, measured, and judged. Cale's hand brushed the edge of the bed accidentally, and Lyra flinched, tail flicking irritably. He immediately adjusted his position, careful not to intrude further. She caught his eyes, and for the briefest moment there was a silent acknowledgement, a shared discomfort neither wanted to admit aloud. As the night deepened, Kyle began to notice small things. The way Lyra's ears twitched even in sleep, alert to every distant sound. The rhythm of her breathing, irregular but steady, carrying a subtle strength. He realized that beneath the fierce exterior, there was discipline and resilience, qualities he recognized from his own training. And though he would never admit it aloud, he felt a growing respect for the princess lying beside him. Lyra, in turn, began to notice Cale's presence more clearly. His breathing did not betray fear. His muscles, though relaxed, were ready to act at a moment's notice. He had the calm of someone who had faced death many times and had always come through. It was a strange, uncomfortable realization, but it sparked a flicker of trust she had not expected to feel. By the time the first light of the ship's morning cycle spilled into the cabin, something subtle had changed. Neither spoke, but the tension had softened. The closeness that had felt unbearable the night before was now just presence. Both of them had begun to notice the silent language of survival and strength. Kyle rose first, moving quietly so as not to disturb the princess. Lyra opened her eyes, golden and alert, and for a moment their gazes met. There was no fear now, no anger, only a faint mutual understanding. They were two very different beings, from worlds apart, forced into proximity by circumstance, and yet in that silent acknowledgement the first seeds of trust began to grow. That day, as the warship continued its patrol, Cale found himself watching her from a distance, noting the subtle grace in her movements, the sharpness in her eyes. Lyra, meanwhile, allowed herself to observe him in return, the way he carried his gear, the steadiness in his voice as he issued commands. Both were learning about each other without words, understanding that survival was no longer just about the ship or the mission, it was about each other. The first night had been awkward. The first morning brought respect, and as the stars passed silently outside the hull, something unspoken began to form between the human soldier and the Vulpine princess. A fragile, tentative connection born of proximity, curiosity, and the quiet recognition of strength in another being. Days passed aboard the Aurora's Fang, and the initial awkwardness between Cale and Lyra began to change. The close quarters of the cabin forced them into shared routines, waking to the ship's alarms, moving through narrow corridors, and eating from the same small mess hall. At first, every interaction was stiff, careful, but slowly they began to notice one another, not as strangers, not as enemies, but as comrades sharing the same dangerous path. The first real test came sooner than either expected. A sudden alert warned of enemy ships approaching fast, weapons primed and intent on destruction. The warship's alarms blared, red lights flashing across the corridors. Kyle immediately snapped into action, issuing commands to the crew with calm authority, his voice cutting through the chaos. Lyra, too, was ready, agile and quick, her instincts sharper than most humans could hope for. They fought side by side, and it became painfully clear how different, yet complementary they were. Lyra darted across the room with uncanny speed, knocking out controls and evading blasts with a grace that seemed impossible. Kale, using human endurance and Saint strategy, protected key areas, intercepted falling debris, and coordinated the crew's movements. The battle raged on, metal screeching and sparks flying, but together they were stronger than either could have been alone. Then came the moment that tested the bond they hadn't yet acknowledged. A sudden explosion threw a massive support beam across the control deck. Lyra, caught mid-leap, was pinned beneath it. She struggled, but her strength alone was not enough to lift the heavy metal. Kale's instincts kicked in. Without a second thought, he pushed against the beam, muscles straining, sweat dripping down his face. The ship shook with every hit, sparks raining around them, yet he held. "Kyle!" Lyra's voice was sharp, urgent, a mixture of fear and frustration. "It's too heavy." "I've got you," he shouted back, his teeth clenched, determination burning in his eyes. He gritted his teeth and pushed harder, channeling every ounce of human strength into saving her. Slowly the beam shifted, and finally he lifted it enough for her to wriggle free. Lyra tumbled to the floor, breathless and shaken, but alive. For a moment, neither spoke. Lyra's amber eyes met Kale's, wide with surprise and a hint of admiration. He, in turn, felt a strange warmth. Not just relief, but an unspoken connection. "You saved me," she said softly, her voice a mix of awe and disbelief. "I said I wouldn't leave you behind," Kale replied, his voice steady, though exhaustion made it hoarse. The chaos around them continued, but in that brief pause a seed of trust had been planted. They were no longer just a human and a Vulpine princess forced to share a bed. They were allies, comrades who had relied on each other in the worst moments possible. Respect had transformed into something deeper, a recognition of courage and loyalty. Later, in the small cabin they shared, the tension had shifted. Lyra sat quietly on the edge of the bed, still catching her breath, while Kale removed the soot and debris from his uniform. Neither spoke at first, yet the silence was no longer uncomfortable. There was understanding in the quiet, a shared acknowledgement of what they had just survived. Kale glanced at her, noting the singed fur on her shoulders and the small scratches on her hands. "You're tougher than you look," he said lightly, trying to ease the lingering tension. Lyra's ears twitched at the comment, but a small, almost imperceptible smile tugged at her lips. "Humans aren't so bad," she replied, her voice softer than usual, almost reflective. "At least, some of them." Kyle returned the faint smile, a quiet acknowledgement that they had begun to see the best in each other. That night, when they finally lay down, the bed no longer felt like a prison. Lyra shifted slightly, moving closer. Not fully, but enough to bridge the gap between them. Kale didn't pull away. For the first time, proximity didn't mean discomfort. It meant connection. The battle had taught them something more than strategy and survival. It had revealed courage, loyalty, and the first fragile bond between human and Vulpine. In the quiet hum of the damaged warship, something unspoken blossomed, a trust that neither could yet name, but both felt deep in their bones. And in the darkness, as stars streaked past the hull, Kale and Lyra began to understand that perhaps against impossible odds, they could not just survive, they could thrive together. The warship floated through the quiet emptiness of space, a fragile bubble against the endless void. After the recent battle, the crew moved cautiously, repairing what they could and ensuring the ship remained operational. Kale and Lyra returned to their shared cabin, their movements quieter than usual. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind fatigue and a strange awareness of each other. That night, the cabin was dimly lit by a single overhead light, casting long shadows on the metal walls. Kale lay on his side, awake despite exhaustion, listening to the faint hum of the ship's engines. Lyra's amber eyes reflected the soft glow, and for a moment, she did not curl into her usual tight ball. Instead, she leaned back against the wall, her ears alert but her posture slightly relaxed. "You humans," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. Kale turned his head toward her, curiosity and patience in his eyes. "You carry so much. You carry fear, pain, and yet you keep going. I do not understand it fully." Kale thought for a moment, the soft red light painting his face. "Maybe it's because we have to," he said simply. "We keep moving, keep fighting because someone depends on us. Because giving up isn't an option. I guess it's survival, yes, but also something more." Lyra's gaze softened. "Humans trust. You protect even when it is not required. My people, we value cunning, strategy, manipulation, courage, Yes, it is admired, but often unnecessary. You make it seem essential. Kale smiled faintly. It is essential. To me, at least. I can't leave someone behind. Doesn't matter what they look like or what species they are. Doesn't matter if I like them or not. If they need help, I help. For a long moment, Lyra said nothing. She studied him quietly, letting his words sink in. His honesty, his simplicity, and the unwavering strength in his voice unsettled her in a way she had never expected. The fierce, proud princess, accustomed to strategy and diplomacy, felt something unfamiliar. Something like trust. Something like hope. Finally, she spoke again, softer this time. You are different from what I expected, Kale. Strong, yes, but more than that. You inspire. Her tail twitched gently, a subtle sign of her growing comfort. Kale's expression softened. And you're stronger than I imagined, Lyra. Not just fast or clever, but resilient. You survived more than most people ever would. You're not just a princess, you're a warrior, and I respect that. For the first time, the silence between them was comforting rather than tense. The bed, which had felt cramped and awkward, now seemed to hold a strange sense of safety. They did not speak further, but both felt the unspoken bond forming, a fragile connection built on shared struggle and honest words. Hours passed in quiet reflection. The stars outside the small porthole glimmered like distant fires, and the hum of the engines became a lullaby of sorts. Kale could hear Lyra's breathing shift, more relaxed than usual, while she, in turn, noticed the calm steadiness in his chest, the way he radiated a quiet courage that did not falter even in darkness. In that small, cramped cabin amidst the metal walls and soft hum of the ship, barriers began to crumble. Pride and suspicion gave way to understanding. Respect grew into something warmer, gentler. Two beings from worlds so far apart began to recognize each other not as strangers, not as duty-bound partners, but as companions in the truest sense. Finally, Lyra's voice broke the silence once more, soft but certain. Humans, perhaps we are not so different after all. Kyle smiled faintly. Maybe not. Maybe we're just better together than apart. And in the quiet darkness, with only the stars and the hum of the ship for witnesses, Kale and Lyra discovered the truth, that even in the vast emptiness of space, even in the chaos of war, trust, courage, and understanding could bring two very different beings closer than they had ever imagined. The night passed, calm and unbroken, leaving both of them changed. The awkwardness was gone, replaced by a fragile, growing connection, a bond that neither battle nor distance could easily sever. The Aurora's fang drifted through a quiet sector, but the calm was shattered without warning. Red alarms blared and emergency lights bathed the corridors in a harsh glow. The ship's sensors screamed warnings. An enemy fleet had appeared, weapons locked and ready. Kale's heart tightened, but his training took over. He shouted commands, moving through the chaos with precision. Every crew member looked to him, knowing he would guide them through the storm. Lyra, by his side, was a blur of motion. Her agile frame moved with grace that no human could match, navigating the damaged corridors, checking systems, and helping the crew take defensive positions. Despite her pride, she did not hesitate. She had been a princess, a symbol of strategy and diplomacy. But now she was a warrior, fighting alongside a human who had earned her respect in just a few days. The first shots hit the hull. Explosions shook the ship, sending metal debris flying. The emergency lights flickered, casting the cabin and corridors in strobing red shadows. Kale and Lyra moved together, instinctively covering each other as they guided the crew to safer stations. Their coordination, though unspoken, was perfect. Lyra's speed and agility complemented Kale's endurance and tactical thinking. For the first time, both realized that together they were stronger than either alone. Then came the worst moment. A massive support beam collapsed in one of the main corridors, pinning Lyra beneath it. She struggled, but her strength alone was not enough to lift the metal. Panic surged through her, but Cal was already there, pushing aside debris, sweat dripping down his face. His muscles burned, but he refused to stop. "Kyle, it's too heavy," Lyra shouted, her voice a mixture of fear and frustration. "I've got you," he yelled back, summoning every ounce of strength. His arms shook as he strained against the beam, the metal groaning under the weight. Sparks flew from damaged circuits. Smoke choked the air, but Kale held fast. Slowly, inch by inch, the beam shifted, finally allowing Lyra to wriggle free. She tumbled to the floor, breathing hard, heart racing. Kale dropped to one knee beside her, wiping sweat from his brow. "Are you okay?" he asked, voice low but steady. Lyra looked at him, amber eyes wide with shock and something deeper, admiration, gratitude, perhaps even something she did not yet name. "You saved me again," she breathed. "I said I wouldn't leave you behind," Kale replied, voice firm despite exhaustion. Around them, chaos continued, explosions, alarms, and the shouts of the crew. But for that brief moment, the world narrowed to just the two of them. Fear and pride had given way to trust. Respect had deepened into something more tangible, a bond forged in fire and danger, unbreakable and undeniable. As the battle raged on, Kale and Lyra continued their efforts together side by side. Kale coordinated the crew, making sure everyone stayed safe, while Lyra darted across the ship, neutralizing threats and ensuring vital systems remained operational. Every move they made was precise, every glance exchanged a silent promise. They would protect each other, no matter the cost. Finally, after what felt like hours, the enemy ships retreated, leaving the Aurora's Fang battered but alive. Smoke lingered in the corridors and the hum of the engines was irregular, but the ship had survived. Kale and Lyra stood in the main corridor, breathing heavily, covered in soot and sweat. For the first time, words were unnecessary. Their shared glance said it all. They had endured, together. Later, back in their shared cabin, Lyra leaned against the wall, still catching her breath. Kale removed debris from his uniform, sitting quietly beside her. The night was heavy with silence, but it was no longer uncomfortable. It was a silence of understanding, of shared experience, of lives saved and trust earned. Lyra's tail brushed against Kale's arm, not entirely by choice, but it did not move away. "You humans, you are remarkable," she said softly. Kyle smiled, tired but genuine. "And you, Lyra, are stronger than anyone I've ever known." In that cabin, amid the quiet hum of a war-torn ship, a bond had solidified. Kale and Lyra were no longer just a soldier and a princess forced together. They were allies, friends and something more, united by courage, trust, and the undeniable strength of the human heart. The battle was over, but the warship Aurora's Fang bore the scars of its struggle. Smoke still curled from damaged corridors, and the hum of emergency systems filled the silence. Kale and Lyra returned to their cabin, exhausted, bodies aching but hearts steadier than before. The chaos of battle had faded, leaving them in a rare and fragile quiet. For the first time, the cabin did not feel cramped or uncomfortable. The shared space, once a source of tension, now felt safe. Lyra curled up against the wall, tail brushing lightly against Kale's side. He, for his part, did not move away. Instead, he leaned back, letting the warmth of her presence fill the room. Neither spoke at first. Words seemed unnecessary. They had fought together, survived together, and something unspoken had grown between them. Humans. Lyra began softly, her amber eyes reflecting the dim light. She paused, as if weighing every word. "You carry so much. I can feel it. The weight you bear, the responsibility you take, it is remarkable." Kyle shifted slightly, looking at her with a faint smile. "It's not easy," he admitted. "But someone has to. Someone has to keep others safe. I've done it my whole life. I guess I never thought about it like you said. Remarkable. I just do what's necessary." Lyra's ears twitched as she considered his words. "You do not just survive," she said quietly. "You protect. You inspire. Even in the chaos of battle, you bring calm. My people value cunning, strategy, but you show me that courage, pure courage, is something more. Something alive." Kale's chest tightened. He had never heard such words from a Vulpine before. "I didn't do it for praise," he said, his voice low. "I did it because it was right. Because you mattered, and now I realize that maybe some things are worth more than just surviving. They're worth protecting even when it's hard." Lyra's tail brushed his arm again, tentative, unguarded. "Kyle," she whispered, "I never expected this. Not from a human, but you've changed how I see my own world, my own people, and me." Kyle turned his gaze toward her, meeting those amber eyes with quiet intensity. "And you've changed how I see mine," he said softly. "I thought this mission was just about duty, but it's more. It's about connection, about knowing someone is worth protecting, about trust, about loyalty." The two of them sat in silence for a long while, letting the words sink in. letting the warmth of their shared presence replace exhaustion, for the first time since being forced together. The bed no longer felt small or restrictive. It was a place of comfort, of safety, a space where two beings from different worlds could simply exist without pretense or fear. Lyra tilted her head, softening further. I never thought I could feel this. At ease, with a human. Not just with any human, but with you. Cale's hand brushed against hers almost by accident, and neither pulled away. I feel the same, he said quietly. I don't know why it's taken me so long to realize, but you matter. More than I expected. The stars outside the small porthole glimmered like distant fires, a reminder of the vastness of the universe around them. Yet in that small cabin, among the hum of the warship and the fading scent of smoke, Cale and Lyra discovered something larger than the cosmos itself. Trust, understanding, and the gentle beginnings of something neither had anticipated but both now cherished. Night passed slowly, the hum of the ship a steady heartbeat beneath them. For once there was no tension, no awkwardness, just two beings sharing a quiet space, learning the true strength of companionship and finding comfort in a bond forged in battle, trust, and the quiet bravery of the human heart. And as Lyra finally curled against Cale, letting sleep claim her, he felt a strange sense of pride, not as a soldier, not as a protector, but as someone who had earned her trust. They were no longer just human and Vulpine. They were something more. The Aurora's fang drifted into the docking bay of the Allied station, battered but alive. Smoke still trailed from scorched panels, and the hum of repaired systems filled the air with cautious optimism. Crew members hurried to assess damage, shouting instructions and exchanging nods of relief. Amidst the chaos, Cale and Lyra stepped off the ship, their bodies still aching, their uniforms marked by soot and scratches, but neither noticed the mess around them. Their eyes were locked, silently acknowledging everything they had endured together. The shared cabin, once a place of tension and awkwardness, now existed only in memory. It had been transformed in their minds into a space of understanding, bravery, and trust. What had begun as an uncomfortable necessity had grown into something far greater, a bond forged in fire, in danger, and in quiet moments of truth. Lyra's amber eyes scanned the docking bay, observing the other crews, the bustling mechanics, and the human and alien faces that moved with purpose. She turned to Cale, a faint smile tugging at her lips. You humans, she said softly, truly are remarkable. I never expected to find courage like yours. In one individual, and yet here it is, undeniable. Cale shifted, feeling the weight of her gaze and the warmth behind her words. I didn't do it for praise, he said quietly. I did it because it was right. And because I realized that some people are worth more than duty. Some people are worth protecting even at every cost. For a moment, neither spoke. The hum of the station, the chatter of the crew, and the distant roar of engines were all muted against the stillness between them. Lyra's tail brushed his hand lightly, a gesture that had taken days to allow. Cale held her gaze and offered a small, genuine smile. He had fought battles across the stars, faced enemies more terrifying than any imagination could hold, but nothing compared to the unspoken bond he now shared with the Vulpine princess. The captain approached, nodding at both of them with solemn respect. You survived the impossible, he said. Both of you. And you did it together. That's the mark of a true team, a true alliance. Lyra inclined her head, acknowledging the praise, but her focus never left Cale. We did it together, she said firmly, not because of titles or orders, but because we trusted each other. Cale nodded. Exactly. And that's stronger than any fleet or strategy, stronger than any weapon. They walked together through the station side by side, no longer human and Vulpine merely by circumstance, but allies in every sense. People noticed their presence, the calm confidence in Cale, the poised strength in Lyra, and whispers of admiration followed them. It was not the royalty or the human soldier that drew attention, but the undeniable fact that together, they had overcome the impossible. As they reached the exit, Lyra glanced at him once more, amber eyes reflecting a mixture of pride, gratitude, and something else she could not yet name. Whatever the future holds, she whispered, promise me we'll never forget this. The bond we formed here, it's worth more than any victory. Cale's hand brushed hers again, a quiet promise and a simple touch. I promise, he said firmly. No matter where the stars take us, what we've built, will never break. The docking bay doors opened, revealing the vastness of space beyond. Stars stretched endlessly, silent witnesses to the trials, courage, and triumphs of the human soldier and the Vulpine princess. Together, they stepped forward into the light of a new day, their bond stronger than fear, stronger than pride, stronger than distance. In that moment, Cale realized something profound about humanity. It was not just strength, or strategy or technology that made them remarkable. It was heart, the capacity to care, to protect, and to trust against impossible odds. And Lyra, for her part, understood that even the most cunning and disciplined species could learn from courage born not of calculation,